One of the reasons we wanted to reach out to you guys is to better understand just why this boom in data centers
Sure.
across the country, but particularly here in Indiana. It seems like they're popping up all over the place. So can you kind of first of all just explain what is driving all of this demand recently for data centers?
We're at a moment now, the average household today has 21 connected devices in it. We're going to use twice the amount of data in the next 5 years that we used in the last 10 years. 95% of Fortune 500 companies are operating on a cloud based platform. 91% percent of small businesses now are using AI throughout their business practices. So our industry is working to meet this demand. We're about 11 gigawatts short of data center capacity that we need to meet today's current demand. So we're scaling to meet this, but you can't discount the economic benefits that the data center industry does bring to the communities in which they locate. Obviously from an investment perspective, but jobs and property tax perspective as well.
So you said that demand is soaring. The average home has 21 connected devices. Can you kind of explain what the everyday need is for what are these data centers doing?
So I mean, to your point, everything we do online today is powered and processed through a data center. So, and it's not just artificial intelligence. Actually, about 25% of the workloads occurring in data centers right now are AI related. About 55% of that is for cloud, and the rest is for traditional and legacy storage data practices. It's your health records, it's your bank records, it's government data, school data, telehealth, remote work. All these things that we've come to rely on as a society, these Zoom calls, are all powered and processed, through data centers. So that artificial intelligence number is going to go up to about 50% by 2030. But cloud computing is going to remain a predominant workload in these facilities, for the foreseeable future. So again, everything we do, if you think about all these different technologies that we're trying to deploy around energy efficiencies, around autonomous vehicles. They all have to rely on data centers, to power and process that data.
So why has Indiana become such an attractive place for data centers? What does Indiana offer that is unique?
It's been fascinating to kind of watch Indiana's rise as a market. So traditionally, you've had the states I'm sure you've heard about: Virginia, Texas, Georgia, Illinois, Ohio, Arizona, California. They've all been primary markets, and now you're starting to see some kind of fluctuations in that. And kind of, Indiana has been an emerging market for quite some time, and now it's quickly kind of becoming one of those primary markets. One, you have land availability. Two, you have a skilled workforce. You have the connectivity that is needed. Being at this crossroads of the country, and you have reliable energy policies. And a I think leadership across the state that understands the need for these and the value that they can bring local communities. Understanding there is a number of counties now who've looked at regulations or moratoriums. I think it's incumbent upon us as an industry, our members, and our many stakeholder partners to get in front of folks and, listen to what those concerns are, speak to what's already been addressed, what's manageable, and then, hopefully find some kind of common ground to ensure these projects, get off the ground. But not every community, not every data center is looking at every community, right? And not every community is going to want to cite one, but there are going to be a lot that do as well. So we'd love to work with folks and kind of get to that point where we can see this industry continue to grow.
I'm looking at the Washington Post that has a headline just a couple days ago. Data centers unite many Americans on both parties in a shared hatred. You guys have an uphill battle.
Sure.
Why do you think there is so much hesitation and just opposition to data centers right now?
Yeah, and I think one, We are there obviously are concerns around the growth in artificial intelligence, right? And our facilities are kind of a physical embodiment of that. But I also think too, again, not every data center is an AI data center, and folks have lost sight of that. And I do think there's been a lot of misperceptions about the industry that we were probably too slow to respond to earlier in the process. But this is an industry that's constantly, evolving and innovating as well. And the data centers of 2015 and 2016 look wildly different than today's data centers. So, again, I think it's incumbent upon us to understand the concerns, listen, and then speak to some of these things that are already being addressed. And if they're not, how can we work with the communities to address that?
Utility use, use of electricity, power
Yeah.
grid, water resources, those kinds of things?
Yeah, absolutely. No, so I mean, obviously, there are questions about electricity prices, and historically, and a number of national studies now have documented this. The data center industry has not been the cause of today's electricity, prices, and it's a very complicated, set of components that go into determine electricity prices, right? So you have things like inflation, generation retirements, the need to modernize the grid, extreme weather events. All these different things are playing into today's electricity prices. And actually, I'm sure you're aware of Indiana Michigan Power's announcement that base rates are actually being reduced for all ratepayers because of the revenues they're seeing from data centers. So the data center industry can be a significant grid modernization partner. The grid is we have not invested appropriately in it for a number of decades now, and when you bring this many megawatts per hour onto the grid, we're helping pay for the wires and the poles and all the things that go into delivering electricity. I think the key moving forward here is ensuring that it remains the case that the data center industry pays for its full cost of service, right? And you have a number of different utilities. You have national regulators, federal regulators looking at things like large load tariffs. There's a number of different proceedings going on to ensure this remains the case. So that's one area, and we're doing some of the most fascinating things in the country in the energy space. I mean, 84% of the renewable purchases done nationally in the first half of 2025 were done by the data center industry. We're investing in advanced nuclear technologies, geothermal, long duration storage, all these different things that a number of partners in the environmental community, claim to want, right? So again, I think we're going to keep innovating and keep doing these fascinating things. I think the key is again ensuring that we pay for our full cost of service. And then to your second point on cooling, again, the data center industry is increasingly getting more and more efficient if they use water. Not every data center uses water. Some are using air-based or air cooling systems. In a climate like Indiana, you might have data centers that are literally using the outside air for about 90% of the year, and then for a few weeks during the summer using liquid or water cooling solutions. The use of liquid cooling solutions, it's about 22% today. That number is going to go up to about 50%. So, but I think from our perspective too, context matters. We use far less water than other industries do. In 2025, the data center industry nationally used 39 billion gallons of water, which sounds like a lot, right? But golf courses use 500 billion gallons of water. The food and beverage industry used 533 billion gallons of water. We lost an estimated 2,500 billion gallons of water due to leakage in our water utility systems alone. So there's been studies that show we use less water than laundromats or car washes, all these different things. And again, we're going to keep getting more and more efficient. You have obviously, I'm sure you've heard of the closed loop system. It's very common nowadays, but you have direct to chip, liquid immersion, very innovative things going on in the evaporative cooling space as well. So, and you can't discount the fact too that there is an inherent trade-off between water use and energy use, right? If you use less water, you're probably going to use more energy, and vice versa. So, our hope is long term we can kind of right size that and get to a point where obviously you're being more and more efficient with both energy and water, but that is the current state of the market at the moment. So, but again, we're going to keep getting more and more efficient by the day. And there's a number of other areas too that we could speak to around backup generators, et cetera.
I wanted to move into talk just briefly about tax incentives and public investment. A lot of these projects are getting tax incentives. Um, we've heard from people who say, why should taxpayers subsidize facilities that are owned by some of the world's largest technology companies?
Look, 38 states, and that number is obviously, changing a little bit at the moment, but 38 states across the country have had some kind of exemption on the sales tax or some kind of program for data center investment, and it's worked, right? The 12 states that do not have the incentive, with the exception of California, do not have robust data center markets. So the industry does go where these incentives are, and they're incredibly important when you think about the need to refresh and modernize your IT equipment every 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years. It's also incredibly important if you're a co-location company, and you're leasing out space to customers. So and again, those customers are going to be hospitals and banks and governments and schools. So there is that effect to it. I think we're in this moment where the incentives are being questioned. But I would remind folks too that like Indiana, like Illinois, like Michigan, these are sales tax exemptions. They are not tax credits. The state is not cutting checks to these companies. Basically, it's a discount on future tax revenue that would not have come if not for the exemption. So, and again, when you think about the property tax benefits that can come along with a data center project, in some communities that we're looking at, the data center is going to pay 4 to 6 times more than the traditional industrial property. So these can be game changing, and I think we're at a moment where let's look at modernizing the incentives. You can put in place requirements that get to the things that state and local leaders, communities want to get at, whether it's around energy or water, transparency, different things. Like we can look at that, but don't take yourself out of the running. Especially in a state like Indiana, which is really starting to hum for this kind of investment. And you're seeing states like Illinois really start to kind of backtrack, and I think it's an opportunity for a state like Indiana to attract the industry and do it responsibly. But also in 5 years, I think Illinois is going to look at Indiana and be like, I wish we would have kind of done it that way instead of the way we're going right now.
Finally, Brad, if this were proposed in your neighborhood or next to your neighborhood, what concerns would you have? What questions would you want to know before you would support it?
It's an important question. I think you as the community have every right and I think duty to put in place if you want to draft an ordinance that makes sense for your community. So if you look at different ordinances, you want to think about things like setbacks. You want to think about things like siting, and these ordinances, and I've seen a number of them, will say, hey, data center facilities or industrial facilities have to be south of X road, east of this road, so you can kind of plan appropriately. You want to think about things like where your fiber is. You want to, obviously think about your land use, but ask about things around cooling considerations. Ask about what kind of power generation they're expecting to use. If you want to put in place, or you already have in place, noise decibel limits, like that's a very common thing. So, again, from our perspective, these are very manageable exercises that can be dealt with locally at the and as well at the state level. Another example, the on backup generators, there was a study that came out of Virginia. Only 7% of the allotted emissions that were permitted in Virginia were used. And when you think about the data center capital of the world, and that's because backup generators, one, the industry does not want to use them. It's expensive, it's dirty, but at the same time, they're used so sparingly, only during extreme situations like power outages, and then maybe a couple of hours a year for maintenance and testing considerations. So another example of in your ordinance, you can set in place when if you want it to run from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. as a window on a Thursday afternoon, like when that maintenance and testing can actually occur, for instance. So there are, again, there are many manageable things that can be put in place based on the community. We often have a hard time, I think, standardizing this across the country, because a data center in downtown Indianapolis is going to look different than a data center in the in a rural area, and the data center is going to look different. Might be a little bigger in the rural area, but again, think about your community. Think about what kind of considerations are there for your community, and kind of put in place a framework that works for everybody.
Brad, before I let you go, is there anything else that you would like to add or you think we should know?
No, again, I think the industry is, committed to doing responsible development in Indiana, and is doing so. You look at the Amazon NIPSCO project, for instance, up in Northwest Indiana. Like, that's a fascinating arrangement between a company and the utility there. So, again, we're doing all we can as an industry to meet this moment, for the demand for digital services. But we want to, be responsible partners in the development of that.
All right, Brad, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Likewise, thank you for your time.